Just over 1 week ago, Apple not only released the new iOS version 12, they also updated GarageBand to version 2.3.6. And the question I'm getting asked a lot is it worth updating to iOS 12 and to the new version? Well, in this video, I'm going to tell you all about the good, the bad, and the ugly from the new GarageBand and let you know if it's worthwhile updating. Let's go. Hi, my name is Pete. This is Studio Live Today, where I help you create, record, and release your best music. And one of my favorite platforms for creating is GarageBand right here in iOS. Now, if it's the first time that you've been here on the channel, I do things a little bit differently. You might be expecting me to rant for 20 minutes and then finally loop back and say, oh, yes, I do recommend, or no, I don't. Well, I'm not going to do that. Right up front, yes, I do recommend that you update to the new GarageBand, but there's a few reasons. So if you want to know a little bit more detail, definitely hang around. But yes, you should. I've done it on two devices so far, my iPad Air 2 and my iPhone 6s Plus, and it's worked flawlessly. So both the update to iOS 12, which you need to do to get the new version, as well as GarageBand 2.3.6. Now, before you do any of that, make sure you're backed up. So back up to iCloud or back up to your Mac or your PC using iTunes, to make sure that you have a backup copy of your complete iPad or iPhone, because you just never know. So with that warning in mind, I definitely recommend it. Some of the new features that we have, the Midi Importing, the Midi Loops, the drummer loops, and I've done videos about all of those, and they'll be linked in the description as well as at the end of this video. You can check those out if you want to see those actually demoed right here on the iPhone. I think that they're just really cool. They provide some additional functionality that GarageBand's been lacking for a long time. And there's some things that are still missing, which I'll talk about in a moment, because I've had a lot of folks comment on my original video to let me know what they wish was in the new update and what they're hoping for in a future update. But before we dive into that, what devices do you need to actually update? That's probably a pretty important thing. So in terms of iPhones, the iPhone 5S is the minimum requirement. So anything earlier than the 5S isn't going to run iOS 12 and therefore is not going to run the newest version of GarageBand. From an iPad perspective, it's the iPad Air 1. So anything iPad Air 1 or newer, so I've got a 1 and a 2, but anything newer than that is going to run it. Any iPad Pro is going to crush it, no problems there at all. And the iPad Mini 2 or above is going to run. The Mini 1's not going to be able to run iOS 12. And if you've got an iPod Touch, it must be a 6th generation. The latest iPod Touch is going to run iOS 12 and the latest version of GarageBand. So hopefully that helps you know what you need to actually update to the newest version. And to update, I show that in my previous video, which will link up there. I'll show you how to update to iOS 12 and how to download and install the new GarageBand and some of the cool new features. So you can check that video out if you haven't already seen it, and that will give you a bit of an overview. But now that we've got that out of the way, that I've given you my base recommendation, let's jump in for those who want a little bit more detail about my view and my opinion and my experience so far using GarageBand 2.3.6 over the last week. Okay, let's start with what has been good about this update. Well, number one is that it has been as stable, if not more stable, than previous versions. And that's always an important thing for me. I don't want to update to a new version only to find that there's a whole bunch of new bugs and a whole bunch of new unstable features. So in my experience, it's been really stable. I've had a couple of people tell me that they had a few issues with it crashing when they first installed, but they seem to have cleaned up over time. So it may have just been a new iOS 12 just needing to get everything sorted out first. But for me, on both of my devices, and I'm running some pretty old devices, so I've got an iPad Air 2 and an iPhone 6s Plus. These are not the latest and greatest from Apple, so they have been working fine and been really stable. So I'm pretty confident that if you update, you're going to have a good experience from that point of view. The second positive, or the good thing, is the Midi Importing. I'm really loving the Midi Importing. I've got a heap of videos, and I'll link one of them up there right now. A heap of videos that I've done over the last week where I've been playing with the Midi Import feature and showing you all of the different cool things you can do. And the one thing that I like the most is probably the Midi Loops. So whether you're using the track view or whether you're a live loops person particularly, we've not only got the WAV file loops that we had before, but we've got new drummer loops, which are really, really cool. And again, I'll link another video where I talk about drummer loops, but we've got little MIDI loops. So these are things that we can actually drag in and then change the instrument and change the tempo. So unlike the old loops where you could just throw it in there, it would be very static and you could do a little bit to sort of change the speed or to reverse it around, but there wasn't a whole lot of flexibility. We've now got really flexible MIDI loops, and I think that we're only going to see more and more expansion around that. I'm hoping that Apple start adding in more like new sound packs that are going to have more of these MIDI loops, because they're so much fun and they're so flexible to use in our project. So they're kind kind of the two main things that I've been focusing on, or that I've found that have been positive, is that yes, it's no worse than it was before, and that is important, and the new Midi Loop features are very, very cool. So that being said, let's now jump in and tell you about a few things to think about, or a few things that aren't exactly perfect, or that folks are hoping that we did see that we didn't see in this version. Okay, so let's jump into the bad. And I say bad in that way because there's nothing that's really that bad, but there's a few things that folks have been struggling with or perhaps wished were in this update that weren't. And number one that I'm hearing about is Midi Out. So we have the ability to import Midi now. So we've got Midi in, but we don't have the ability to export Midi or send Midi data from GarageBand into either other apps or into hardware. So a lot of folks want to use their Midi controllers and they want to send data out of GarageBand to play their Midi controllers. Well, we can't do that yet. And I say yet because hopefully we do get Midi export or Midi out features in a future version. But for right now, it is just an import, just the ability to bring Midi into GarageBand. And speaking about Midi, there have been some issues. So the Midi importing is far from perfect, and I'll go through what some of the key issues, and thanks to all of those that have given me feedback on previous videos about some of the issues you're having. But the number one issue seems to be just not being able to import a Midi file at all. So GarageBand seems to be very particular about the standards of the Midi file that you're importing. So the ones that I've tried primarily have worked, but if you grab a Midi file from a third party that you're not actually sure how it was actually put together, what is happening sometimes is it's showing as grayed out. So you're going to drag it across, and in the demo version that I have, you would have seen that we drag it across and it shows up as green, or you can actually read it. It says whatever the file is, .mid, canyon.mid in my version. You drive it in and then you can actually play it back. But a lot of folks are saying that it's grayed out, which means that it's a non-supported file. So Apple's actually reading that file and going, nah, this isn't a recognized Midi file. We're not going to be able to import it. And unfortunately, we don't actually know why that is. We don't know what particular things in that Midi file Apple is not liking at the moment, and GarageBand is not accepting, except to say that it's a bit hit and miss. Sometimes you're going to import something that's going to work perfectly, and sometimes it's not going to work at all. And when I say work perfectly, sometimes it's not working perfectly either. So another thing that we've had reports of, and that I've experienced myself, is importing a file and the drums being put on a keyboard track. So not being put on a drum track. And unfortunately, GarageBand doesn't give you an easy way. You can't just click and drag it because it says, no, that's a keyboard track now. We're not going to put that to a drum track. So it can be a fiddly process to recreate the drum track when it imports it as a keyboard track originally. So that's not ideal when you try to import a track and you get all the other tracks that look right, but the drums are on a keyboard. It's like do 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 do. Not, yeah, maybe that's your jam, but not for me. The other thing is that some tracks being missed. So again, that compatibility of the Midi file. So sometimes you'll import a track and it might be a 12-track Midi file and there's 10 tracks there or 6 tracks. And you're like, hey, dude, where's the rest of my tracks? So that is something that happens. And again, these are early day sort of teething problems. We don't know exactly why or exactly what it's looking for and not finding, but that's actually happening. And the other thing is the interesting choices that it chooses for its instruments. So GarageBand doesn't have a compatible instrument for everything. And I showed this in a video where I did an Earth, Wind and Fire track that had a brass section, and it basically just put brass ensemble for everything. So it doesn't have a saxophone, it doesn't have a trumpet, it doesn't have a trombone. So it just went brass, 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 brass. So you're not going to get that definition and all of the different instruments. Of course, yes, you can go in there and change the instruments, but you're still stuck with the instrument library that GarageBand actually has. Which takes me to the final and probably most important point, and that is we got no new actual sound, no new instruments, no new actual things to play with. So yes, there are new loops. So we've got new loops that we can bring in with those Midi loops. We've got the drummer loops that are extra handy, but we got no actual new instrument. So the one that folks seem to be wanting the most is the saxophone. And now there is a very cool app which I'm about to do a review on called Sensual Sax. I have to be careful how I say that. So if you are looking for a really cool saxophone, I do recommend that. I've just been playing with it. It is awesome, and I'll have a full review coming out very soon. So if you're not subscribed to the channel, now's a good time to do that so that you can check out that review. And if you are looking for a saxophone for GarageBand, you can use that via Inter-App Audio and Audio Units plugins, and it's very, very cool. So that is a solution but you're paying $5 or $10 depending where you are to actually get that. What we want, what everyone's wanting, is some new instruments. So I'd love the saxophone. I'd love, someone said bagpipes, which I think would be so cool, have bagpipes here in GarageBand. But yeah, your trumpets, your trombones, all of those other instruments that we want to have in there that we haven't had over the updates so far. So that's probably the other bad, but again, it's not really a bad because it's just something that's missing that we've been waiting for. We've been sort of craving some new instruments, and I've mentioned it before, but those guitars, they need an upgrade in a big bad way. The smart guitar sounds are just that old school tinny. They've been the same for about 5 years. We need some new guitars. Apple, new guitars, get onto it. So there's a few things that could be better about the update, but again, it's a new update. There's new things that we would like to have in there that we don't just have yet. In terms of the ugly, I've talked about the good and the bad. It's actually nothing that's really ugly because it's actually quite pretty. So the new interface looks really good. It's really slick. The new drums look amazing. If you've played with it, you'll have noticed the upgrade to the interface. And interface isn't everything, but it's something. It is important to have something that looks good so that when you're creating, you're not distracted by really ugly graphics or really ugly interface. So yes, in terms of the ugly, there's not really anything ugly there to look at. It's actually looking quite good. So there you go. Hopefully that's helped you out. If you are looking to update your GarageBand to the new version, now you know some of the good and the bad and the ugly. If you have already updated, hey, at least you're not alone. If you're experiencing some of these MIDI issues, then other people are as well. So it doesn't make it any better, but at least it's not you that's doing anything wrong. It's just that it's a new feature that we're getting used to and that GarageBand needs to refine over time. So I'm sure in new versions we'll get that. And hopefully we'll also get some of those new instruments in future versions. If you've got any comments, questions, or suggestions, please drop a comment down below. I'm pretty active in the comments here, as people who have been around the channel for a while probably know. So if you've got anything that you want to let me know, anything about the new update to GarageBand that you want to let me know about, or you just want to chat about anything or tell me you love my hat, then jump down in the comments. I'll reply to everyone and anyone who has anything to say here, especially about music creation and about GarageBand in this case of this video. So thanks again for watching, and I'm going to see you on the next video. Hey, thanks for sticking around. We've got 2 more videos about the cool new features here in GarageBand 2.3.6, and those are linked in the little links down below. You can also subscribe to the channel by clicking on the Studio Live Today icon over in the top right corner, or head on over to studiolivetoday.com for more audio goodness.